2025 Boomtown Pics. We're comparing all 5 states this morning. This is the great property political debate. Stay tuned. Richard Shepard, thank you for joining us. Chief Wealth Property Advisor. That is one heck of a title.
Steve.
Yeah, all right. It sounds a bit geeky, doesn't it? A bit cheesy, but gotta have a
thank
crack.
you for making the time to come on this morning. We are excited to have you.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me on the show, guys. So I've been listening in now and then for a while. So obviously known a lot about Novak Agency for a very long time. So it's a pleasure to be on the show and a privilege. Thanks, guys.
Just give people a 30-second snapshot as to what you do. You said you've been doing it almost 30 years. Super long time.
Yeah, so it's property investment advice. So we liken it very much to financial planning, but just for property. So we start with teaching people how to invest, how to use finance techniques, how to manage cash flow, how to reduce risk, and how to build a portfolio that you can retire on young, and usually replace your income within sort of 7 to 12 years of starting with us. So yeah, that's really the journey, and just want to get people excited and pumped about the future.
Absolutely.
Alex, that sounds exciting. Replace your income in 7 to 12 years.
Yeah, so most people think you retire off net income from property, which would take a lot longer, probably 20 to 30 years. But when you learn how to retire off liquidated capital growth, and even you can add development profit to that, you can normally retire on about 15 to 25% of your equity, which is probably 5 to 7 times the net rental return of most properties. So it's learning how to live off the whole return of the property, not just net rent. And there's a bit of science and a finance strategy to that, as well as getting the ideal markets.
Do people come to you, Richard, with one property, or for their first property, or 10 properties? When do they sort of start talking to you?
As soon as they read an article we've written or get referred by a client. You don't have to have any. Ideally, you just need a minimum deposit. But we can get people started on as little as sort of $50,000 to $70,000 in the more affordable markets, often the ones that are booming. Most come in from Sydney. We're Sydney based or Northern Beaches based. We've been writing a property column for Northern Beaches and Pittwater Living magazine for about 15, 20 years now. So most come in with equity in their home, and then we teach them how to use that effectively and safely. But you don't need to. You can start with just a cash deposit.
So, Richard, your favourite at the moment, where's your favourite with? Are you sort of recommending stuff based on price range or your buyers, sort of lifestyle, or where's your favourite place to buy at the moment?
Yeah, so our favourite is still Adelaide. For a lot of reasons. But Perth and Brisbane are still right up there. But a big surprise will probably be to most listeners is Darwin is really been hitting our research radars for a couple of years now, and probably has the strongest fundamentals it does have the strongest fundamentals in the country. It's just we're waiting for the human reaction to that. Because, as you probably know, people don't respond to fundamentals instantly in property. It probably takes 1 to 3 years for the crowd behaviour to sort of take over and start to get the growth.
What's one or two sort of things that hit the radar, get it flashing?
Yeah, so yield and affordability are big. But one of the biggest things, and we might show this on a graph one day, it's a bit of our IP, so we're a little bit sensitive about it, is the relative price difference to Sydney. So we use Sydney as a bit of a benchmark. It was, the first market colonised and the one that got a head start from all other markets. And when you map on a graph the price difference between another market and Sydney, you get this recurring price difference. Sydney will normally grow first for 7 to 12 years, and it will get to double, even triple the value of some of the other markets. And that big price difference is like a magnet or a vacuum that helps drive the other markets. So when Sydney gets really unaffordable and really expensive, and all the markets appear much, much cheaper, that price difference drives behaviour. And the other markets are often way more affordable with higher yields. And one of the key tripping points for a market start to boom is often when yield gets close to loan repayments. So renters start then becoming buyers. And that accelerates capital growth and starts the whole psychology of the cycle, the fear of missing out and momentum in the market. And then capital growth will outpace income and rent growth of sort of 5 to 12 years until it gets to that glass ceiling. So there is a real cycle in property, and one market can honestly grow by 10 times more than another for 3 to 5 years, even 7 years.
So are you cycling people out of markets and into markets, or you just put them there for 20, 30 years, or how do you do that?
Yeah, we do now. Once we got our research to the point where we were sort of 90 to 95% confident that you were going to make back your buying and selling costs within a year or two, and then certainly make it back by 5+ times over the next sort of 10 years, then we did start to advise to sell. Obviously, you got to be a lot more confident to advise to sell. It's one thing to pick the market about to boom, and it's another a whole level of confidence to advise someone when to sell. So we started that about 13 years ago, when after doing it for about 17 years and realizing a few of these really science-based measures and metrics on how differently two markets are likely to perform. So yeah, we do now. And when you do sell, it's a massive opportunity if you have a home loan. Well, if you don't have a home and you've got investments, then that can be a great time often to then buy your home. Or if you do have a home with reasonable amount of debt on it still, then when you do sell an investment, it's one of the best ways to really quickly pay down your home loan, if not pay it off. We normally get a home loan paid off in 5 to 8 years by investing in property and then selling it when it's had the sort of 50 to 100% growth and paying your home loan right down or off. And they're really big moments for us. That's when it really goes beyond numbers and really hits you in the heart with emotions, when you help people actually pay down their home or pay it off, and then really realize how they can be on an exciting path to financial freedom.
And what about is there like success rate? Obviously, that would be something with clients that when they're investing and they're talking to someone like yourself. So, what would be the success rate with clients? Would you say half of them do really well, 80% of them do really well? Are they all great stories?
Oh, look, all markets are going to grow eventually. And so we're just in the markets that usually have the highest yields and have already started their boom. And most of those markets have been flat for 5 to 15 years. So the poor period of growth is behind you. When you look at every market that's having a boom, you notice the most common thing about them is they had a plateau or a negative run for 5 to 15 years. So we just wait for the green shoots and for it to go past that 6 or 7 o'clock in the cycle, because it can sit at 6 in the cycle for longer than you expect. It almost always does. So essentially it's pretty much 100%, because it depends what you call success. Is it some growth? Is it any growth? Or is it above the long-term average of sort of 9%? So in the medium term, everyone's doing well. And we will diversify. Most clients come in because we're buying in the affordable markets. Well, they seem really affordable relative to Sydney, usually. Until then, Sydney becomes the market that's about to boom. Most clients can often buy 2 to 5 properties in those markets because they're normally 7 to 900,000 with sort of 4.5 to 7% yields. So you can start to diversify into the top 2 or 3. So your growth over the medium term, over that sort of 5 to 7 years, has always been great. There was a time we got into Brisbane units a little bit too early. They had been flat for about 7 or 8 years, and all the data suggested that it would start growing. And so there was probably about 10 years ago, there was a few years where Brisbane units weren't growing, and those damn developers just kept building and building and oversupplying the market more than we expected. So that's one thing that's really hard to judge is, it's a bit like Melbourne right now. Melbourne units should be growing. They have been flat for about 15 years. It's quite extraordinary. It's a brilliant city. It should be growing, but it's just the confidence has come out of the market. It's been flat for a long time. And the developers down there are prolific. They will just keep building. So I think that's the only thing that's pulling Melbourne units down.
My favourite property one.
Oh, bust it out, Billy! Bust it out!
I can't go an episode without saying it. Supply is the enemy of capital growth. I have to say it's so true. Some of these suburbs we cross compare, the supply is it seems infinite.
Yeah, and it will normally feel more that way when the market's been flat and hasn't been growing. But absolutely, there's a lot of developers out there. Most of them actually will only build in the same market they live in. And, normally when they've been doing really well through a boom, they'll build up a lot of equity and cash and probably excessive confidence, and then keep developing through the plateau and keep oversupplying it when it's been flat. And some of them are and most of them are incredibly determined and successful at what they do. So, they can often afford to keep supplying the market, even though the fundamentals are not ideal at the time. So we'll educate developers as well. Most of them, are way better at developing than we are, and great at their job about building great properties and doing that effectively and efficiently. But not many really look at the different markets and really try and understand, well, should I be developing the market I live in, or should I be developing interstate where it's about to boom a lot more and is highly undersupplied? So that's what we focus in. We're one big country. We're the same currency. We're the same interest rates, but people move interstate when a market is much cheaper, and that helps really drive the market and a difference in growth for 7 to 15 years. Adelaide's had 4.5 times the growth of Sydney in the last 6 years, and Brisbane's had about 3.5 times. Now that's just growth. When you add rent, it's probably been 5 and 6 times Sydney in that time. And Sydney's still done okay to well, particularly if you picked the eyes out of the timing. If you bought in the middle of COVID, Sydney and Northern Beach has done exceptionally well since that low point. And it's never to say Sydney is bad. Sometimes it's the best performing market. Sometimes it's the worst. But every market is like that. They are never the best always. It's actually impossible, because when one market is well ahead of the others, then that relative affordability is like a big magnet or a handbrake. So
Richard, I think that gets me with you there. Things that gets me, Richard, when people make comments about versus comparing states and things like that, my hair pricks up on the back of my neck a little bit, because I think there's distinctly, if you go, there's regional markets, and we can isolate out, metro and regional, which is a significant isolation to do. Everyone sort of just lumps it all together, and that data sounds better. Or they'll look at because I think if I go across any of the states that I love in Queensland, Victoria or Sydney, within those states, there's regions that there's no chance I'd put a dollar in there. So
Yeah, yeah,
I find it really interesting with on a performance basis because we've seen whenever I see data, and I'm probably as biased as hell. But whenever I see data and I compare it to the Northern Beaches, I go, yeah, nah, no. Not,
yeah.
but
We,
I'm comparing a region that has 100,000 properties, and I'm biased towards those 100,000 properties in performance. Whenever I rack that performance up against any state or area, it's always like, yeah, no, Northern Beaches is still real good. Rental, sale,
yeah,
overall.
yeah, yeah. Look, we're cautious with regional, probably beyond cautious. We almost never do regional because it's this, we've got, 7 big cities that have really diverse economies. Um, and there's always two or three of those big cities growing well to very well. In fact, they rarely go backwards. They can a little bit. They can sit flat for a long time, for sort of 5 to 15 years. Um, but there's always a capital city. There has been the last 80 to 100 years anyway. There's always been one or two capital cities booming, growing really well. So, and regional cities, they're harder to pick and they're more fickle. All right. It's because of smaller populations. It can just take a change to, if there's a mine or a big industry sector there, for it to really change without notice, and it can be a lot harder to predict. So yeah, we're a big fan of sticking to capital cities and picking the eyes of those capital cities. So some cities like Sydney are enormous, geographically, and you can have,
Yeah.
units booming while houses might be going flat, or the opposite. And then, normally the ripple starts in the higher value areas in the city and the coast, and then it ripples out for, at least 3 years in a city the size of Sydney. And then normally houses go first, and then usually 1 to 4 years later, units will follow. COVID can really change that because where do people want to live during COVID? So you can always pick the eyes out of a capital city, and especially when you've got 7 of them, you can always find good, far more consistent and safer growth in a capital city. The research needs to be next level on regional, but sometimes when the capital cities are really expensive and you're just trying to get in your first property, some of the regionals can be good to get started, but you want to, have some exceptional research to be more confident of it. But if it means that's the only way to get started, then don't rule it out. It's better to get started in a regional city that's about to grow, and then use that equity then to get into the capital. So yeah, we occasionally do a little bit of regional. Regional for us was more Hunter Valley, which is really Western Newcastle. And we followed the boom from Sydney up the northern beaches, through Central Coast, up the south coast of Newcastle, and then it literally flowed west of Newcastle and up the north coast. So you can track the ripple. The ripple is real. In fact, we're building a thing called a ripple radar. So, a bit like the rain radar for which, you have higher colors for the
That's
higher
cool.
amounts of rain. So that
Yeah.
happens for capital growth. So you can literally track the ripple, and we do it all the time, but more manually. So we're just trying to track it more electronically and visually.
Richard, another question
Yeah,
over here.
yeah.
Are you facilitating the buying? Then putting the tenant in if it's an investment property. Are you doing all of those steps, or do you sort of hand people?
Yeah, we
partners.
Yeah, we either do or manage. So manage the service. So we don't do property management in-house. Neither do we do sales in-house. We give it to people like you. You guys are way better at that than we are. We will do the advice and the strategy. We do the finance in-house generally. Yeah, we create the plan and the strategy, and then we will source the properties. and set up the finance and the plan. And then we'll find, good property managers in the area we're working in and get them to manage them. And when it's time to sell, we'll get them to sell. You'd run rings around me, guys, in selling. You're way better at that. It's a real skill set to sell property well, isn't it? And I know I've been in property for years, but I know most agents are far better at me than selling. It's a particular niche, and that's not what we specialise in.
So, Richard, before we go, we're going to get you to rank Queensland, New South Wales, Victoria, Northern Territory,
and WA. It's on the list. But
preference number one.
Yep. Yeah, number one
from your
is
company. This is not a Novak
Perth,
opinion. This is a Richard Shepard opinion. Yep.
Yeah.
Number two.
Yeah, number one is Adelaide. 2 is Perth.
Yep.
3 is Brisbane. But fourth, and it's likely to become first in the next year or two, is Darwin. Who would have thought?
Wow. That's a pick.
Yeah.
Fifth?
Whoa. We don't go to fifth. Fifth, sorry, here we go, is Melbourne
New South Wales. Where'd you put New South Wales in that? You're putting New South Wales behind all of them. Yeah,
at the moment. Look, mostly because New South Wales did better than all of them sort of 10 or 15 years ago. It had its boom from 2008 to 2017. Then it's been a bumpy ride since then. So it will do okay to well. Everywhere is going to do better for the next 10 years than it has for the last 10, is my belief. If you want to buy a home and you really want that home, it's going to grow on the northern beaches. So buy now. I've never.
Are you going houses or units?
It depends on what. As an investment, units.
Yep.
Yeah. Yep. Because the growth has been better in houses through COVID, and the price difference is one of the biggest it's ever been between houses and units, and the yield in units is much better at the moment. Units for sure in the northern beaches. If you're really stuck on northern beaches and want to focus on that, and you'll still do okay well. It's just if you can't afford to get in the northern beaches, or you want to make higher total growth and yield, then it's the other markets at the moment. I did mention though that there is one suburb that we're just starting to recommend in Sydney. And it's Sydney Olympic Park units. I
was surprised.
Mostly because the boom missed it for about 10 to 15 years. And now all of a sudden, the Northern Beaches has kind of moved to the Northern Beaches Surf has kind of moved to Sydney Olympic Park with a new wave pool. And that will help the market grow better.
So what's your punt, Billy, next 10 years?
I like the fact with any property purchase, if you can kind of have a bit of a dual purpose, I think that's clever. I think if you can buy, like I do a lot with first home buyers, and the number one driver in their decision making is affordability. They just look at a unit for 700,000 or buying an investment in Perth that can go and live in 5 years or so. But I think if you can buy a base and you can live in it, you take advantage of all the stamp duty incentives and first home buyers sort of help. That would be my go.
Right, boys, we're going to play this show in 10 years' time. I'm punting Northern Beaches units, and we're going to play this show in 10 years' time and see who was the highest in capital growth and rent combined in those places. And I'm feeling lucky.
You're the man,
Richard,
whoever wins gets shouted the beers, huh?
That's right.
Yeah. Big night.
Look forward to it.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Thanks for having me on the show, guys. Real pleasure. And love to come back before 10 years is up, maybe, Mark.
Yeah,
100%. But but I'm putting this one in the vault though. We're going to pull this one out.
Yeah. Record it. Hold me to it.
Record it. Hold it. All right. Take care.
Awesome.
Thanks,
Cheers.
man.
Richard. Thanks.
Thanks, guys.